Hey there, listener. Just wanted to put a little bit of a warning at the beginning of this episode because we will be talking about a rare form of cancer that unfortunately affected children in the 19th century and before. So if that's something you wish to avoid, you may want to go to the next episode. That's all. This podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to provide medical advice. It exists only to entertain. In the mid-18th century England, a business owner looking to hire more staff has approached a mother with a question. You there, madam?
Yeah?
May I please have a moment of your time?
All right then.
I can't help but notice those children clinging to your skirts there.
Yeah, these my little ones.
They both belong to you, do they?
Yes, these are my little ones, my little children.
Are they currently employed?
No, sir. Employed, no, sir.
One looks to be at least 5 years old. He's not got a job.
Oh, no, sir. We're trying to wait a little longer before he gets a job anywhere.
Well, here's the good news. I've got an opportunity for him, and even the other one, if that's all right.
What kind of opportunity are you talking now?
Well, would you say that your children are go-getters, high-energy, detail-oriented children?
Oh, and my children, they're the best children. They're very smart, you know. This one's got a good head on his shoulders. This one's a little funny sometimes, but they're good boys, yeah.
Well, I think they may be perfect for this opportunity, and I wonder if I may hire them right here and now.
What's the opportunity then?
Well, it's chimney sweeping.
Oh, no, I'm not going to have my little ones going all in about then, in the tiny little dangerous spots, and it's not a good idea.
Well, have you considered the danger to the families whose chimneys could catch fire at any moment if your wee ones would not slide up the flue and clean the thing?
Oh, I don't know about the dangers to the families, but the dangers to my children.
But they're so small. I mean, you can't train small. They are perfect for the job, and I would really like to see them gainfully employed.
What's in it for me and my young'uns then?
Mummy?
Yes, a little one.
I think I could be good at this.
I think you could do.
I think I like to rise and grind. I like to get up very early in the morning. I don't know if I've told you, but I'm up all right in the morning. I'm thinking, how can I improve me lot? How can I help a family?
Oh.
I'm wondering how maybe this man could help us.
Oh, little Tommy, you don't know what you're on about.
Oh, but I feel like I could shimmy up a flue.
Do you want your little bits to get stuck in the little spots? Absolutely not, little Tommy. You're not going to go climbing around in there, getting your little bits stuck in the little spots.
Okay, that sounds like a no.
You're not going to take my little children.
Well, unrelated question. Do you know where the nearest orphanage is?
Oh, yes, just about a kilometre up that way and then turn left. Right there, you can't miss it.
What's a kilometre?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, right. I just, do you know if their children are equally small?
Oh, yes, they've got them even smaller.
Excellent. Alba. You gotta listen, you don't have to read. Welcome, everyone. This is Poor Historians, a podcast misadventuring into the archives of medical history and beyond. I'm Max, and I'm joined here by my good friends and colleagues, Aaron and Mike. Hello, everybody. Hello, Aaron, and hello, Mike. You should say your name. You should say hello in the order of your names.
Hello in the order of your names.
What do you mean in the order of my name?
You did the same thing.
Let's try that again. Hello, Aaron and Mike.
Hello, Aaron and Mike.
We'll work on that.
I'm just going to see how long he pulls this out.
As well as our newest addition and goodest friend, Alba. Hello, Alba.
Hello.
Way to say a normal hello after your name. I really appreciate that.
You didn't ask her to repeat what you just said.
That's true. But unrelated to that, I just want to ask everybody here, what was the worst job you all worked as a young person?
Ooh. Can I start?
You go ahead.
A pheasant farm.
Really?
I was 18. I graduated high school. So that summer I played adult league baseball. And the person that owned this pheasant farm was like, you can work for me and then play ball at night. And it sucked. It was physical labor. I very much respect farmers. And this wasn't really even farming. It was hard.
When do you plant the pheasants?
Yeah. It's like really smelly. You got to clean out their areas like daily. And you get that ammonia smell. I'm sure it was like highly toxic. And I inadvertently stepped on one once and I shot its liver out of its butt. And then I quit.
Great story.
No.
That was what made you
Wow.
quit. The poor pheasants, my God.
Wow. How about the rest of you without any animal death components?
Yeah, I had a catering job that was awful because it was just hard and bad. But then the day I quit, we had to do a festival, and they made me stick my face through one of those plywood cutouts where like you're going to take a picture, but I just had to stick my face through it, and little kids threw giant sponges that were full of water at my face for like 2 hours. That was my job. I had to stick my face through the thing in the plywood, and they would throw. Yeah, and then I was like, I quit.
I don't know why
Wait,
that sounds fun to me.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time it was kind of funny, and then you're like, oh, it's hot out. This is kind of cool. Ha ha ha. But then, like, the second hour was
Starts
just,
to feel like waterboarding.
What about you, Ethla? Any bad jobs as a kid?
I would say any of the restaurant jobs I worked, I was not very good at it. So that sucked. People get real mad about their food. But the worst memory was someone in the men's room had an accident all over the walls and the toilet and everywhere. And I was instructed that I had to clean that up. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
Were there designs
You're like, I
painted
quit.
on the walls? Because that's not an accident anymore.
Well,
That's intentional.
You know, I'm realizing the group I'm talking to, y'all are like, seen worse.
I've actually made people poop on the walls like that.
Yeah, it was just poop everywhere. I was like, how did it get that high up? And it was like chest high. I was like, how did you poop that high? I didn't understand it. Cleaned it with a mop.
Yeah, it's a spirit.
If you write red rum with blood on the walls, what do you write with poop? It's got to be
Just don't
Just-
answer.
Colonoscopy? I don't know.
I was gonna say for me it was
That's a lot of
working at a
poop. You'd have to have
skating
a
rink,
lot of
like a
poop.
roller skating rink, which just meant breaking up fights between adolescent 6th to 8th graders and hearing the same song over and over again. It's just Tootsie Roll.
That might have been fun though. Like kind of fun. Not even the video game part. Like
Okay, that was fun. I got free games on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I think it was actually written into my paycheck, and I didn't know any better, so I thought it was a good deal. All right, a lot of bad jobs, obviously, and that does have something to do with what we're going to talk about. But before we get to that, let's take a moment to talk about our sponsor, Artery Inc. This episode is brought to you by Artery Inc., a medicine and anatomy-inspired apparel company here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Not only will you find a large selection of pre-made t-shirts and other apparel designs on their website, but did you know they actually do custom orders as well? What if you want to design your own swag using Artery Inc. stylish motifs? Well, there's an option for that. With their help and designs, you can have the best dressed doctor's office, hospital department, or dare I even say medical museum staff in existence. Check out this and so much more at www.arteryinc.com, that's INK, and use promo code LISTEN2PHP at checkout to save 10% on orders over $35, and please note that this code does not work for subscription boxes. Let's get back to the show.
ooh, I have a good idea. You could do necrotizing fasciitis compression stockings.
What?
Why is that a good idea?
They could design it. So like you could draw a necrotizing infection, and then it looks like you've got.
I bet they could make it stylish and pretty.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now,
Like
necrotizing means
necrobiosis.
your skin is dying.
Mhm.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it would
All
be
of you died
compression
soon after
socks
that.
that make it look like your skin is
Your skin
dying.
is dying.
I think that's
Yeah.
what Mike thinks is a good idea.
Yep, that's what he wants.
Sounds like it was a really great idea.
Mike, I'll pass it along to him.
Yeah,
At least
could you
they could
please?
say is no and probably never sponsor us again. But
And FYI, because I said it on the air, it's copyrighted, so I get a cut.
I will let them know as
Is
well.
it? Is it? Is it?
I don't necessarily know that it is, to be honest with you.
Trademark, maybe.
We heard it here first. Okay. So this part of the show is called Mike's Trivia Challenge, and we'll get to the topic we're going to talk about soon enough. But before we do, it is time for Mike to show us what he knows off the top of his head with no preparation. We're going to give him a listener-submitted question. He's going to answer it to the best of his ability. It is a medical history topic, and if he does not get it correct, then that listener will win an eponym, something named after them in medicine, which is totally a real thing that will be used in textbooks from here on. So, Mike, are you ready for this one?
Ready.
All right. This week's question comes from Liza. And her question is, what is celiac disease and when and how was it discovered? So part of that is almost a gimme for you, but I think we should probably talk about what it is.
I was like, oh, I'm going to get this one.
Yeah, that's not even, that doesn't count. So go ahead. Mike,
when and how was it invented?
Yeah, so what is celiac disease?
Is it the vaccines? Okay, so celiac disease is a disease of the gut. It's a malabsorption issue.
Which means bad absorption.
Yeah, bad absorption. I'm getting this one confused with Crohn's disease.
No.
As far as who invented it, or when it was discovered. So it was discovered, I think this one was in 1887. So they were doing some work with cows. There's a big anthrax outbreak in northern England, otherwise known as Scotland. There's a bunch of cows that are getting sick, and they just started crapping their brains out. And it turns out that the wheat in that area in Scotland has a lot of gluten in it, and that gluten, when combined with an active anthrax infection, causes horrific bovine diarrhea. And it turns out there's a similar genetic predisposition in people that have celiacs. So they're fortunately immune to anthrax, but get sometimes crippling tummy aches and diarrhea.
Okay, fair enough. Are you going to go with that as your final answer?
Final answer.
Okay. All right. There is something terrifying in what you said, and I'll get back to it. But
oh wait,
so I'm going to do a little quick overview. You're right. Celiac, malabsorption, gut disease, and you did mention this, but you didn't say it in the first part. Was that it is a reaction to gluten, which is a protein in wheat. So wheat, rye, barley. So I'm filling in those blanks a little bit. So,
no, but it was more subtle that I put it in.
No, I know. I just want to just piecing it apart. Anywho, so how did you come up with that year?
Together.
Yeah,
just curious.
Apart. You piece together.
How did you come up with that year? What year did you say?
1887?
Yeah.
Just a year that popped in my head.
That's partially correct.
Oh.
Now.
Oh, no, partial correct.
Yeah,
That's
here's
another
the
one.
good news, though. That's actually frighteningly correct for the year. Everything else you said was wrong, but the year was at least correct. So you can kind of, the answer for this, there's maybe two ways to score this. So you can either go with the more contemporary person who kind of described it, or you can go back to the Greeks, if you will. So if you want to go back to the Greeks, you're talking about the 2nd century Common Era, and that was Aretaeus of Cappadocia, and who was a Greek physician who described a chronic diarrheal illness that he called the celiac affliction. And from what I read, celiac actually kind of derives from a Greek word for abdominal, like abdominal related. And so he would note that like some people would have these intermittent symptoms of bad diarrhea, and he actually suspected it was a malabsorption syndrome. He wouldn't really know what that was in the intestines, but it seemed to be something food related is kind of how they put it together. And this is actually a disease that probably didn't exist before 9500 BCE, because that's really when we think grains were first cultivated, etc. So maybe the first person was the Greek physician I just mentioned, but more contemporaneous.
Wait, what was his name? Diarrheacles?
Yes. More contemporaneous is the pediatrician Samuel Guy, who was kind of thought to be the modern describer of the illness. In 1887, he gave a lecture noting that celiac seemed to be related to a child's diet. And he recommended the elimination of like everything. He's like, don't feed the kid vegetables, milk, rice, or any highly starched foods. That part he probably got right by accident, because a lot of breads and grains can have starch in them. But he recommended a diet of meat and thinly sliced bread, which technically could have worked
if you did rid of all the gluten.
Well, I was gonna say it depends what you make the bread out of.
Slice it really thin.
There was apparently one child he put him on a diet of 1 pound of mussels every day for like a year, and the kid was like, I don't have the abdominal problems, but I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, that's disgusting. It sounds like a good idea Like maybe a dinner.
Initially.
I gotta be in the mood for mussels.
Yeah. So
Is that where ghee butter comes from then? For Dr. Ghee?
no.
No, okay.
So
Yeah, I thought that was a good question.
no, I know how you got there. So we're gonna say it's mostly more you were more wrong than right. So I think we still need to give
but
the listener
year,
the
though.
that's
Year.
impressive. You stopped me on that one. I was like, whoa, what?
Mhm.
And I thought you were
so is
googling
this
it.
2 out of 3 that Mike got? Because he could answer.
Yeah.
That's like 2 out of 3. Because
The one was kind of a
2 out of 3
gimme.
ain't bad.
yeah.
Al-
Okay.
Alba, don't feed the mic.
I'm sorry. no, Mike's wrong.
But so Liza, you still win. You win this round. And I wanted to tell you that after going through the annals of medicine myself, I came across a condition called Liza's trichocyanosis. You guys ever diagnose this?
Oh yeah, last Thursday I had a case, classic
classic.
case. But you go ahead. I don't want to steal your thunder. No.
All right. It's a peculiar and fashionable condition whereby the hair of the afflicted person turns a bright and rich blue color. And it's spontaneous. This is not considered to be a detrimental condition at all, but rather the opposite, because that person basically, with this condition, carries an innate degree of punk rockness, and that makes them cool AF. So there you go. Liza's trichocyanosis. There you go.
It's related to trichopinkinosis, which
What's the Greek word
That's
for
cool.
pink?
I don't
Mike,
know.
I can't answer that.
I don't know.
All right.
Styricles.
Well, there we go. So, Mike, great as always.
Yeah, thank you. I did great.
Did better than I thought. Well, hey, if you, dear listener, would also like to be part of the show like Liza, please slide your question into our social media DMs. Send it via email to poorhistorianspod@gmail.com, or go to our website, submit it there, and we will try to get it on the show. So let's jump to what we're going to be talking about. And as keeping with some of our recent episodes, you guys have no idea, do you?
None.
Nope.
No.
Zero. And if you do the same thing I'm doing, I'm going to be scrambling.
So behind the
next
scenes,
episode.
Aaron and I both we have to record on the same day, so we both wrote episodes, but we didn't talk about who wrote what. So it's a very small chance that we both wrote the same episode. I don't think it's likely, but let's go into it. So I'm going to start with the case part, and that's going to take us to the mid 18th century, to jolly old England, where a nervous 37-year-old male is awaiting in the examination room to discuss what he thinks is something of a bit of an embarrassing problem. Well, at least given the sensibilities of the time. You notice he's unkempt, he's particularly filthy, and he tells you as the physician or surgeon that he's noticed a lesion on his privies. That started as a small bump or wart, or maybe it's grown into 50 pence sized ulceration. I don't know what a pence really is or how big it is, so just throwing it out there as a guess. But it's an ulceration that's kind of on the bottom of the scrotum. And I want to point out to the listeners that we want to be professional on the show. So that can also be medically called a yam bag. Just anything you guys would like to know about this patient.
Well, how long's it been there?
Noticed it started a couple months ago, and it just keeps slowly growing.
Growing? Is it painful?
Irritating. Wouldn't call it painful.
It's just the one sore. It's nothing.
One sore as far as the patient is aware.
Any other constitutional symptoms such as fever, chills, or weakness, malaise?
Constitutional symptoms include a strong want for liberty and freedom.
Mm. Ooh.
No
Whoa,
other.
Is this a clue?
no other.
It took me a minute. I got it.
Constitutional symptoms, like he didn't have fevers or like a lot of weight loss or anything like that.
Yeah.
Things that affect the constitution.
Yeah, around that time, had he visited any ladies of the night or laddies of the night? Had he seen a prostitute? Or had sex with an equally unkempt woman?
It's a very reasonable question given the story. This is...
Can I ask
it's
this
a big
time?
no. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, in the 1700s, am I going to ask sexual history?
You can do whatever you want. This is a thought experiment.
I guess. Yeah, okay.
Fair. But no, yeah, it would be very reasonable to ask. And he is a 37-year-old pure soul who would not know anything about any of that.
So he's never had sex.
For the purpose of this, no.
Okay.
Has he been sitting anywhere naked that he doesn't normally sit naked?
Very good question. The answer is yes.
Ooh.
Oh. Nice.
I'm not going to tell you where just
cacti
yet.
in
We'll
England
see.
around this time. Yeah.
So yes, the answer to that is yes. And really good question. All right. So
Do his balls hang low and do they jiggle to and fro? Can you tie him in a knot? Can you tie him in a bow?
Can you throw him over your shoulder like a continental soldier?
Ooh, we nailed it. This might actually be the guy in the song.
I quit the show.
You said constitutional symptoms.
No,
There
it's
you go.
fair. I will take that. So
It's Yankee Doodle Dangly.
This is going to be the whole episode
this
of
is,
ball
I
puns.
knew this was a risk picking this topic, and I'm just going to press ahead here. So, all right. So all those questions, and actually nobody. I mentioned something in the very beginning. That first line, nobody asked about it though.
He was sad.
No, I don't think I said it. There we go.
Unkempt.
Really dirty and unkempt. Crazy dirty and unkempt.
Does he have a mousy odor?
I don't know what
How
you're
long are
driving
his
at, so I
nails?
don't know. No.
I'm just asking random questions to paint a scene.
right.
You think I'm after a
No,
case. I just want to know what I'm walking into. When I take his socks off, is
Aaron
there a
wants to
cloud
know
that
what he's
dries in
smelling.
my
Aaron
air?
wants to know the smells.
It's a weird thing, Aaron.
do I
There are
see
places
smell
on the
here?
internet for folks like you.
Smell
So
on the
there
internet.
it's a new experience.
Yeah, that's the point.
So very unkempt, yes. And you might even say he's a little sooty.
What does he do for work?
Oh, he's a chimney
Sooty.
sweep. I.M.
He is a chimney sweep.
Or he's Santa Claus.
So, speaking of
Not Santa
examinations, weird segue. There, you get to the examination. So you take a look at this gentleman's yam bag, and you notice that there is the ulceration he
You go
mentioned.
straight to the yam bag. You don't.
Mm-hmm.
So you go straight to the yam bag, and you notice that there's an ulceration, just as he had said, that has some kind of raised edges around it. Doesn't particularly for Aaron, doesn't smell infected. It just looks like it's kind of taking away skin. It's,
Are you sure? Because I got way up in there.
I'm
and
sure you
just
did,
sniffed it.
but no, you did not notice that.
No, I didn't do that.
You can't quite see, like, you can see the ulcer, but you can't quite see through it, meaning it hasn't gone all the way through the outer part of the scrotum itself. It's on the surface, but it just looks really, really concerning. And you wonder, maybe you can see a little bit of what we call the fascia, which is one of the layers of tougher tissue that's kind of within the skin.
tunica?
And
Alba,
one of
Guinea.
no, I don't think that's way too deep. That would be on the testicle itself, if I remember correctly, which I don't. So don't quiz me on that. Let's say you were in the modern time. What would you do with this? What would you? How would you go about figuring out what this is? And what do you think it might be?
Well, I mean,
Put a picture in the chart and refer to urology.
yeah, maybe an ultrasound to look to
what I
see
did.
if that's a deep infection. Like it could be a pustule associated with an abscess.
Sure.
So you might want to know what's going on inside the stack. You might want to try to stick your finger in it.
I mean, as weird as it sounds, listener, that might not be a totally unreasonable thing because you want to see how.
Like if the hole goes all the way through the scrotum, or
Yeah, you get it. There you go. So yeah, and you're like, and what Mike's also getting at with the ultrasound is, can you look through the skin in some way to like see what's happening inside the scrotum itself?
Oh, does he have an intact cremaster reflex?
He does. That is a testicular reflex, and it is normally there.
Is that the one that makes the scrotum bunch up?
Kind of, yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
I don't know why I know
That's
that.
the one.
That's that. Because it's an amazing word. Everybody should know it. So, and what are you guys worried about? Like, what else besides, Mike? You said infection, so like a abscess or something like that.
Yeah, STD, I guess.
Yeah,
Some
totally. It's
infection.
very reasonable. Very reasonable.
Yeah.
I mean,
definitely.
not being a clinician, I would think, like, did he cut his ball sack on something and now it's just getting infected? Like, does he recall any trauma to the area?
Absolutely. No, he'll tell you no trauma. No trauma. This was a non-traumatic process.
But you said something about him not wearing pants.
During his job, correct.
So does he take his pants off does he have to go in the chimney?
How do you sweep a chimney in the 18th century?
You use a chimney sweep? I don't know. But
One of those
Yeah.
broomstick thingies? Are you
There's a
climbing there?
broomstick thing.
Shimmy up and
Well,
down
I'll tell
and-
you what, we're going to talk about exactly how that all has to come together. But the other thing that you'd be really worried about, and probably like referring him to urology, is what else could like
create this growing ulcer that isn't really infected.
I mean, if it's neoplastic, that's an early cancer of some sort.
Cancer is
either
definitely a
skin,
big
dull,
concern
or
with this. And
particular.
so we'd
But
also
that would be pretty rare. Sac
Is he
cancer.
diabetic?
it would be very rare. He's not diabetic. And I think Aaron's probably thinking, like, diabetics can get really scary infections of this in other areas, but especially this area.
Wait, what is this guy's name, or what's the name of his surgeon?
The name of
Is it Fournier?
No, it is not Fournier.
Fournier.
Anywho, well, let me move us. We'll kind of piece this together a little bit more. So yeah, I mean, all the things we talked about are certainly possible, and the surgeon of the time, basically the one who we're going to talk about, would have said, you know what, we need to cut this out. We need to cut this away immediately, because
So like Dave Coulier.
it's cut it out. You're gonna be Full House jokes will never go out of style.
Cut it out.
Yeah, I think everybody did the hand motion. Just if you're listening.
Not everybody. Aaron didn't do it.
Well, Aaron's too serious. Aaron's got a call from his agent. So the surgeon treating this man will basically become known for associating this particular disease with this man's profession. And I'd wager that anyone having completed a stint in like your average medical school curriculum will be aware of the surgeon's name because it's pasted all over the medical textbooks and so many different eponyms. This guy collects eponyms like I collect wrestling posters on my walls. And fun fact, I actually have more wrestling posters in my office than degrees, which I'm very proud of. The wrestling posters, not the degrees necessarily. So here's the thing about the case. I actually kind of threw a little bit of a curveball because I didn't write it as accurately as it would have been for the time. The 37-year-old patient I made up is fictional, because though he's the average age of diagnosis of that condition at the time, the really sad truth is that it would have been more likely that the patient we're talking about was probably somewhere between the age of 8 and young teens, believe it or not.
Oh, God.
And he's filthy because his job is as a chimney sweep. We said that part. But the fact of the matter is that job, that profession actually shortened his life, if not by this particular disease, but like any other occupational hazard you can think of with somebody who cleans out chimneys in like the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So this is basically the story of chimney sweep's carcinoma, which was diagnosed and kind of named by the famous English surgeon, Dr. Percival Pott. That name jog anything? Pott?
Oh, Pott's disease.
Pott's everything.
Pot smokers. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is basically a tale of occupational medicine at its earliest ages. The association of this cancer with the job of cleaning out the chimneys was not accidental. We'll kind of go through that. But the discovery of it led to sweeping, yes, intended, changes in the social expectations for children in the labor market. Come on, you got to appreciate that one.
Mm-hmm.
That was good. That was good. Sweeping changes.
Before we talk about old Percival Pott himself, let's talk about this patient. Basically, in the many that were like him that would be diagnosed with this condition. So this, again, chimney sweep's carcinoma, and the carcinoma just is a word meaning cancerous, is what we call a squamous cell carcinoma of the skin of the scrotum itself. So it's actually a skin cancer, technically. It just happened to form in this area because of some of the ways that this job was done. And it's a cancer that arises from the squamous cells. It's a type of cell that you can find kind of in the skin or in the linings of like your digestive tract or other hollow organs. And so you have squamous cells in a lot of different places. And like any cancer, the basic problem here is that one cell goes out of control, replicating and doesn't stop growing, and that becomes basically a tumor. And in this case, it becomes that ulcer, and it's basically growing and destroying tissue around it. And it may look like an infectious thing, but the kind of part of the story is that it's growing slowly. It's more irritated than infectious. And fortunately, this type of cancer is nowadays super rare in the privy, so to speak. But you definitely find it other places. It's a very common skin cancer. It's very common in the esophagus, for instance. But that's kind of what we're talking about here. So the disease would start really insidiously for the unfortunate chimney sweeps. And
I'm just disappointed you leaned away from the darkness that is inherent in this story. I mean, I feel like it's poor historians. We have to live up to the, childhood
oh, my friend,
cancer part.
give me
You
time.
gonna get there?
Give me time.
Oh boy.
Is it because of asbestos is asbestos a thing then?
Not what's causing this. This disease, basically, for these folks, would start really insidiously. It would start as kind of like this little pimple or kind of wart-like thing, and they might get a little bleeding or scratching at it, but it wasn't super painful, so it wouldn't necessarily catch a lot of attention in the beginning. And there was also around this time, like, hygiene was not the preeminent concern of a lot of folks. So the fact is, as it would grow, it would just destroy more and more of the genital region. And eventually, if you don't do anything about it, it will work its way into like the testicle, and then it will follow up the lymph channels or the blood supply of the testicle, and it'll get its way into the abdomen. And even nowadays, with like everything we have modern, if you find this type of cancer in the lymph nodes of the inguinal region, it's like the crease in your hip if you bend forward, like kind of the groin area. If you find that there, you've got about a 25% chance of surviving 5 years. If it is found in the iliac nodes, which are deep within the pelvis, there's no real survival, even in the modern age. So it's a slow and very grim process.
I take it back. Can we talk about a different topic?
But
Yeah, I'm wondering. You said it's a skin cancer,
technically, this is
but it's on his testicles, and I think of like sunshine and skin cancer. And
I see what you're saying.
You know,
so,
like.
yeah.
Yeah, how to get I guess I would think that the cancer chooses
there
where
was
to
a
pop
trend
up.
where people would go outside and they would sun their bottoms.
Yeah, very popular during this time.
They
The
would just put their
underside of
legs
their,
up.
they just flip them up. And...
So
I wasn't sure that.
Oh wait, that's now.
That that ain't a good idea.
Alba, that's an excellent question. Don't worry, I will address it as we go here.
Okay.
One question at least: why were children in Dr. Pott's heyday being diagnosed with this condition very often? And this was a very common diagnosis in these children. Well, it's because it's the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So that means progress in a lot of ways, but not in the ways that involve treating children like human beings. Mm-hmm. So you see, from the ages of 4 to pre-puberty, the problem was that young boys were just too good at fitting in super dangerous small chimneys where they could do the insanely unsafe job of sweeping a flue for the betterment of society from the 1700s to the 1800s, like from inside the chimney. Yeah. So, and you would think...
Is that why parents always, like, historically want you to eat all your dinner so you are too fat to fit in a chimney?
I don't know, but I'd like to think the answer is yes.
Yes,
because that would be fun.
Okay, Max,
So-
why the testicles or the scrotum?
I'm getting there. Let me weave the story.
The suspense is killing me.
No, you'll get there. Let's talk about chimneys, Mike, next.
No.
No? And you know what? Even better.
I'm imagining I'm claustrophobic and I'm getting anxiety about how this cancer got on the underside of his testicles.
Wait, is it because he went down feet first and then the sack hit
That's
the
what I
wall?
was
and like,
thinking. That's what I was thinking, Mike. And naked because of the less clothes to fit in the chimney, so you can fit in a tighter space, and then his testicles just drag on the wall of the chimney. That's not a pleasant
Alba
image.
is frighteningly correct.
Oh
Yes.
God!
So
no,
it's
no,
hard
no,
enough
no.
to shimmy into a chimney, it turns out. But if you take off clothing and you're going to get filthy anyway, it was actually easier for them to kind of slide in. I will note that this is part of it. Some of these flues in like the chimney could be as small as 9 by 9 inches. So you can imagine if you have to like tuck your arms in and kind of shimmy your way up the chimney, how terrifying that would be.
How are you supposed to clean anything then? You couldn't move your arms. Like, what do they do? Scrape it off with their toenails?
That's, they apparently had like some sort of thing that like they'd bring with them to sweep. But like, so chimneys are like crazy dangerous, especially that now and then. And there was actually like this housing tax in like 17th century England that limited the number of fireplaces per house, which meant you had to like be creative with hooking up all the chimneys to get all the smoke out of people's houses. And so all these chimneys weren't exactly straight up. There was curves, there was, junctions, there was all kinds of gnarly passages. And so these kids are in there basically crawling around in this stuff. And it's the idea is for safety, not for the children, of course, but for the people in the houses, because if you don't clean the chimneys, they build up soot, and that soot is flammable. And so having a chimney catch fire could be, disastrous.
They
and
build
so,
up creosote, not soot.
What's that?
No. It's called creosote.
I see.
It's highly flammable. Had they ever thought about using cats with talons? Like, why don't you just throw a cat down there, just let it try to scramble its way back up?
That's a pretty good idea.
It's all gone.
That is a dark person solution
That
right
might
there.
be more dangerous. I don't know if that's more dangerous.
Let's get
to
that
the
time
cat
machine
handler.
up and running. We're going to save some lives.
Well, and this, so all of this, concern for, the well-being of everybody in the houses, everybody had fireplaces. So, London had its own, smog as a weather pattern, because it was just a lot of descriptions for this time. It's just so gnarly. And so it's kind of funny to me that everybody was so concerned about having clean chimneys, and you're like, this entire environment around you is such a crazy cesspool, and now you're hiring children to go and do this. And I know you guys probably think that the aristocracy of the day gladly offered up the one or two of their extraneous progeny for the job. But I'm going to surprise you to say that it was not the children of the wealthy families that were doing these jobs.
No.
That is shocking.
I know.
I would think they would leap at that chance.
You would think so. But nope, we're talking mostly
Builds character.
orphans,
Yeah, it does.
street kids, and just, children from really poor families. So heap a little bit more tragedy on top of all this. Are we getting there, Aaron? How am I doing?
You're doing
You know what we
great. You're
needed?
doing
We
great.
needed chimney sweepers. We can clean them off when they
To
come
clean
out.
the children.
Then they wouldn't
Well,
have the thing.
Yeah, no, that's that would probably help. So, and here's the other terrifying thing. So, especially Alba being claustrophobic, a lot of these, they may have been small, but kids still got stuck, and so they could. Yeah.
Oh, God.
I was going to say, how often did that
I
happen?
mean, often enough. I mean,
And
if
who
it
would go
wasn't
get-
getting stuck in the chimneys, sometimes the chimneys were still hot or on fire when they got in there. So I won't go through that, but you can imagine it's bad. There's also the soot was so irritating to their eyes that some kids would actually scratch their eyes so much they would lose sight. They'd scar their corneas. And then, there's also the lung disease from crawling in a chimney, right? So,
What kind of? Oh, Jesus! You know what? Yeah, no, I can't believe I said I didn't think it was dark
I think
enough.
this is the pit of darkness right now. Yeah. So I think this is the pit of the darkness. So we should kind of go up from here just for what that's
Were
worth.
there
Hey.
any reports of what they did if the children got stuck? Would they just be like, your house
They
is
would
going to
actually
stink
try.
for a
I
while?
did read, obviously they try to rescue and those sort of things, but it's not easy to do depending where they are. And, so, I mean, the fact of the matter is that,
You send another child after him.
I mean, I'm
So-
saying that
now
probably
your, now
came
your
up.
chimney's full of kids.
I was supposed to bring the darkness, but you made it worse. All right. So it may not surprise you based on all that too, that a chimney sweep was unlikely to survive to adulthood at all, and almost none of them made it to old age. So if a child would die doing this job, the coroner would actually classify this as an accidental death, as opposed to occupational murder, which is how I would classify it. But I'm looking back in hindsight. What can I say? Getting to your question a little bit more, Alba. Speaking of soot, it's really bad. We're not in contact with it as much as we used to be, but we talked about these kids were naked, and they are basically getting coated in all this soot, and it would especially collect on skin like the scrotum because it's sort of wrinkled and dimpled, and so it carries a lot of it, and it just kind of stays there. And with prolonged contact to the skin, the soot actually has multiple known carcinogens, and just that contact with the skin actually can induce the changes in DNA of those skin cells, the squamous cells, to make them become cancerous. And so it's really the contact and prolonged with that is bad. So it's thought that a lot of the same carcinogens in soot itself are probably the same ones that get transmitted through cigarette smoke to cause lung cancer, etc. So it's just kind of a really gnarly substance. And interestingly, one of the final things that helped them make the connection between soot and this type of cancer was a gardener who was either a friend or a patient of Dr. Pott's assistant. And the gardener developed a squamous cell cancer of the skin in the hand that he always used to pick up soot and throw it in the garden, which apparently they would do to treat for slugs. And so they noticed, hey, soot seems to cause that. And so he put 2 and 2 together and said, you know what? I think it's the soot. I think it's causing this unusual and awful cancer in all of these kids.
Well, they just need to take a nice long bath at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's
in their plentiful water supply in their large flat that they went home and stayed in.
All right, fellers, I got more medical questions.
Oh,
about
yeah,
the
please.
soot in the skin. Okay, so my first thought, my confusion about the cancerous cells developing was like, okay, if it's soot in there, and I was thinking like they're breathing it in, like you said, the cigarette smoke. And then I was thinking about like skin cancer and stuff like that. Something that I know penetrates my skin is the UV rays. Mm-hmm. But I don't think of like skin as being permeable, like, you know, the skin on my hands or my arms, or if I had a scrotum, you know, I wouldn't think of that as being permeable or like, you know, and so it's like, so, but that's not true. It sounds like if it can be affected. It's not as protective as I think. My skin is not as protective as I think it is.
In this case, you also have to remember you have things like pores, like in your skin, that can allow things to get a little bit under the surface. But a lot of skin definitely can be permeable to the right substance, not to every substance, especially oily substances can be. You can also think of it this way. You know, they're doing this work. There's like a lot of sweat. There's a lot of that. And so it actually will turn the soot into kind of more of a liquid form. And that's going to be a little bit more likely to kind of get into the little deeper layers of skin. But the squamous cells of the skin are not very deep. So they are like literally like at surface level. And so all you get billions of them, and you have all this soot touching them. One of them could feasibly become damaged. The actual components in the soot can damage the DNA, and then that cell becomes a cancer. And so that's how this likely started. And so it would start in the skin, and then it could spread to nearby structures, basically, is the way I would put it. So yeah, your skin is permeable to many things.
I guess that makes sense. I wear lotion. Yeah. I know it's permeable.
But it is a good question.
But
yeah.
Yeah, it is.
What
a good
about
question,
like
man.
people
it has
that work
to be the
at
right kind of substance.
tobacco plants? Yeah. After the tobacco's dried, if they touch it, would they get cancer?
Yeah, a lot of those.
Maybe if they carry it around when they stretch out their sack and like, here, dump it in the bucket.
Carry tobacco in their sack. Is that what you just said? Carry tobacco in their sack.
Have you never seen the tree of the penis? It's the mouse on a trampoline.
So what about like if I put out a candle and I squish it with my fingies, you know? Is that, you know, like
you're using your fingers. Let's just be clear about that.
You're going to get some
I'm
soot.
going to get some soot on there. So I probably shouldn't be doing that anymore.
So I mean, you're probably going to wash your
such a
hands.
tiny
It'll probably
exposure,
it's a
though.
very small
Oh, because I washed my hands and they didn't wash that much back then.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is like lots of soot, right? They're just coated in this stuff.
And daily,
This has
right?
been-
Probably sun up to sundown.
Mm-hmm. All day
It's
long.
been an anxiety
and just left it on there and just. Oh yeah, I wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah, no, it's all. You walk outside. The second you walk outside, you are in the sun and you are technically being bombarded by UV radiation, and then potentially any of that could also cause cancer. But it's the dose.
Great. So I should just always be anxious. Cool.
Yep. And inside. Yep.
When you go in an airplane, you get increased radiation exposure
It's like
too.
an X-ray. It's like what is it like some
Yeah.
amount of airplane
Is that a
rides
chest
or like a
X-ray?
chest X-ray.
Yeah.
Didn't you just get back from somewhere, Elba?
I did. Yep. Just flew back in last night. Yeah.
You weren't on a beach or anything, were
Was it
you?
a long flight?
I was
oh,
out in the
no.
sun a little
oh,
while.
No.
Yeah.
No candles.
Yep. There were candles. It was a wedding. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh boy. Oh.
Yeah, no, I think dermatologists, don't they quantify skin cancer risk with sun exposure as far as the number of severe burns you've had?
I know it's a big
Maybe
risk
that's
for it.
old.
Dermatology is not
Like
my
if
strong
you
suit.
apply sunscreen, you should be okay.
Well, let's come back to the surgeon we were talking about, right? So the guy who basically we associated his career with this finding and an occupational health risk, and Dr. Percival Pott, is basically considered to be an occupational health pioneer. So he did his surgical apprenticeship at St. Bartholomew's Hospital. That's a lot of syllables, so I'm going to say St. Bart's from now on. He did over 7 years at a paltry cost of £210 for like the entire duration. Do you know how much that is in
That's how
modern
much
money?
He paid them?
Yeah, he paid them.
Or they
he
paid him?
them. How much do you think that is?
$4,200
$75,000 US. Well, I mean, 210 pounds went a long way then, I guess. But so he finishes that apprenticeship, and then he gets hired by the barber's company to practice surgery. And if it seems weird that barbers are licensing surgeons, I refer you to episode 40 on barbers and surgeons in our own podcast library to hear more about that matter. In 1744, he became an assistant surgeon at St. Bart's and went on to be full-fledged surgeon there for, from 1749 to 1787. And that was the year before he died. I'm pretty sure that career at the hospital was longer than the lifespan of the average chimney sweep, I'm sad to say. I mean, that's a pretty good career for the time, but it was all at that one place. So he was really, really, really comfortable there. What can I say? Interestingly, Dr. Pott was not quite the stereotypical surgeon you kind of think at the time, the severe, brooding, whatnot. He actually was known for being nice, I guess.
No way. Dr. Pott was kind of happy and jovial?
I won't say that they said happy and jovial, but he was kind of thought of as a little unusual because he wasn't a big fan of heroic medicine. And when I say heroic...
Well, it sounds like he practiced hospice medicine back then.
What's that? No, I wouldn't say that. He's just conservative for a surgeon. So he wasn't like, let's amputate all the things. So when I say heroic medicine, like in the annals of medical history, we're talking about like the days of always doing something. Patient sick, do something, even if it was insane. Like, bleed them out, put leeches on them, or amputate things. And that's all heroic because you're doing these big interventions.
But he was up against an unbeatable foe.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
So, I mean, technically, if he could excise it in time, people would live. It's just whether you get to it in time or not. And so he was one of these guys who was like, all right, I have the skills to be a surgeon, but surgery is not always the answer. And so he was a bit unusual for that time. And, and even this, he kind of put his money where his mouth is, so to speak. So even in his own health. So in 1756, so he's like well into his surgical career at this point, Pott is thrown from his horse. He lands in the muck of the street, and he has an open fracture to his tibia, one of the leg bones there. And that's a type of break in the bone where the bone bits like peekaboo through the skin and see what the outside world's all about, and get covered in muck. And because the muck of the streets is basically chock full of like mud and horse manure and all those bacteria, it was very common that people would die from fractures. Like they could die from fractures anyway, but especially an open fracture where the skin is open, they were almost guaranteed a bad infection. And so the move back then was amputate. Like it's going to eventually get infected, so let's just amputate it. And of course, amputations, really high mortality because they didn't believe in germ theory. So it's kind of a rock and a hard place, more or less. And so fun part about this story is that, so Dr. Pott's laying in the street, right? And his lower leg is broken. It's open. It's like through the skin. And he gets one of his servants who was with him. He's like, go over to that construction site and buy a door. So the servant goes and buys a door, brings it back, and they use it as a stretcher to bring Dr. Pott back to his house. So all his surgical buddies can come see him. And so when he does, they say, let's amputate. Like, weird, of course they say, let's amputate. And he's like, no, I don't want to. He said, why don't you go ahead and just clean it out really good, splint it, and we'll see what happens. And he was right. He actually survived. He walked again. He healed the fracture, did not succumb to sepsis or overwhelming infection. And because of the conservative approach, he went on to practice for like another 20-some years. And so not only did he like practice this way, he believed it. He believed it for himself. And so I thought that was just kind of a fun story,
Wow, yeah.
It's a little ray of brightness in the story of
it's not
testicular
for me.
Childhood cancer, scrotal cancer.
Because you described this fracture, and I'm just like picturing this street and this bone sticking out. And I've seen these bones sticking out of legs, and I don't like it.
No.
So that's the...
It doesn't sound like something to like, so that's good.
Yeah, that's fair. Mike, you're fair. Yeah, you're okay.
Good,
well, and you can imagine, like in modern age, when we have these fractures, it's like, oh, wow, you need antibiotics so quickly, like right now, and then you're going to go to an operating room, and they're going to wash it out in an operating room and like fix the bits they can fix. But not, in this case, the fact that he survived this at all is pretty incredible, to be sure.
Yeah, I'm amazed. The horse poop got in that wound,
Sure
probably.
Sure did. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it may not be surprising that when it came to like the cases of the scrotal cancer and the chimney sweep disease, not only was he right, but he would know kind of when to do surgery. And if he could get to it before it went into the lymph nodes, as conservative as he was in a lot of other cases, this was one of those areas where he was like, nope, we have to do something. And even his assistants noted that in this time when he would do surgery, it just wasn't as grim of an affair as it was for so many other people, just because, I don't know, he had sort of this more gentle countenance, is sort of the way that it was described. He even Pott himself kind of describes the chimney sweeper's carcinoma and even like what I would call empathetic terms, especially for the time. So like, here's a quote from what he wrote. He wrote a treatise on this. The quote, "The fate of these people seems particularly hard. They are treated with great brutality. They are thrust up narrow and sometimes hot chimneys where they are bruised, burned, and almost suffocated. And when they get to puberty, they become liable to a most noisome, painful, and fatal disease." End quote there. But by that standard, that's like touchy-feely writing, especially for a surgeon of the time. But he actually...
Did they change any practices based on that? Like scrotal checks before you jumped on the chimney or...
Nothing like that. No, preventative medicine still hasn't been invented yet. The association between this cancer, the soot, and all the young chimney sweep stuff did actually start to lead to some society changes directly related to Dr. Pott's work. And so this sees a series of absurd legislative changes actually just starting right after he died. And the first of those was the Chimney Sweepers Act in 1788, and that is the year he died, which aimed to, quote, protect, end quote, child workers. And it did this by ensuing that the minimum working age was raised to a way more respectable 8 years old.
God.
Well, you think about it, like you've already got a couple of years in, you got your 401k, you can't wait till you're 16 so you could retire.
One way to do it. Okay, that seems a little
10-year-olds
silly.
are like, back in my day, I took my sippy cup into the chimney. Kids these days.
Probably true.
There probably were people that were pissed, like, yeah, I was a chimney sweep when I was 4. And
I mean, I gotta say, you see some of those old pictures, and it's like, man, you look like a 75-year-old man in a 8-year-old's body.
Yeah,
From like
we're shocked
Industrial
seeing,
Revolution time.
yeah, we're shocked seeing pictures of people smoking. There's that one picture, that kid smoking outside of a mine, but then like you don't know what he was just doing. Like he deserved that cigarette.
It's fair. No,
The kid is way tougher than I will ever be.
Samesies.
Right.
So then move ahead to 1803, and there were actually societies formed to to bring awareness to the problem and everything. And succinct names for things had not really been invented yet. So the English of the time came up with the following organization. Let's see if I can do this in one take. The Society for Superseding the Necessity of Climbing Boys by Encouraging a New Method of Sweeping Chimneys and for Improving the Condition of Children and Others Employed by Chimney Sweepers, which could go by the unpronounceable acronym, the SSNCBENMSCICCOECS.
It sounds like a Wes Anderson acronym.
It is.
Yeah, I'm trying to sound it out.
I was like reading this going, come on, people, just pick a few of the choicest words and just move on. What are you doing? All right. So then in 1834, British Parliament passed the Act for Better Regulation of Chimney Sweepers and their apprentices, as well as the Act for Safer Construction of Chimneys and Flues. And this actually is getting a little better in the brevity kind of thing. We're not quite there yet, but there we are. And these two acts raised the minimum working age to 10 years old. So baby steps. We're getting there.
Yeah, it's still better.
It's better. It's objectively in a better direction.
How long was that after the first one?
That was that would have been about almost 50 years, so from 1780
Why wouldn't they?
1834.
Why would they regulate the size of the chimneys then? Just say like a chimney needs to fit a 250-pound man.
Well, maybe
Or
you should have been
or
in
outlaw
Parliament back
chimneys.
then. That's a brilliant
Yeah.
idea. I mean, they got to rebuild all the chimneys, and I'm sure there
The
was some
anti-chimney
pushback.
construction league.
There's a pro chimney sweep children coalition that we'll talk about too, just so you know.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, why would you be? In 1840, legislatures were all like, fine. And they raised the working age to 16 years old with the also kind recommendation that nobody under 21 should work in the chimney sweeping industry. As almost rational as that sounds, apparently nobody bothered to enforce any of these laws ever at this point. And so a commission actually looked into this at the time, and they said, you know what, all this legislation, there's actually an increase in child labor now. So that wasn't working well without the enforcement. And so I also wonder if they were just defining children as, anybody up to age 16 at this point. And maybe there are now more children suddenly, but because you've defined them differently. But nevertheless, in 1875,
Define child.
back then it was anybody below age 3.
4.
But in 1875, almost 100 years post Pott's death, an act of Parliament finally forbade children of any sort of working in the chimney sweeping industry. And what do you know? The incidence of this disease, scrotal carcinoma, dropped to almost nothing. By the 1940s, St. Bart's, the same hospital Pott practiced at, had one case of this particular cancer in 5,000 new cancers diagnosed. So, and it did not say whether that was a child or adult, because it can happen to adults and people who don't do this job. It's just way more likely to happen if you happen to do this job.
Maybe that kid was a chimney sweep, recreator, like the Civil War people.
Might have been.
Yeah, it's the way we used to do it.
Reenactor.
Got to do it accurately, otherwise. Well, you might wonder, as I did, why it took so long to see the light on this one. I mean, have you considered that there were some actual pro-dangerous child labor people at this time? Because there were. And you'd be surprised to find out who was in that camp. More people than you would hope to see. One coalition there, maybe not as surprising, insurance companies of the time. They defended the child labor practices because by having the children sweep out the chimneys, it actually made the chimneys technically more safe. And so there were fewer fires and structure problems. And so their argument was well, if you don't have a child clean out the chimney, it's more dangerous. So we want more children cleaning chimneys, I guess. And you may not have also considered the really problematic but lucrative partnerships between, orphanages and parishes who mined those children and the master chimney sweeps of the time, because master chimney sweeps were basically paid to take on, quote, local strays, end quote, and give them gainful employment, and they often source their employees from those orphanages and parishes. And you can only imagine there's probably a whole world of darkness and horrors in that interaction, which I didn't read about and I don't want to.
So Mary Poppins is a horror movie.
That I had that exact thought at the end of this, which is that guy was not as whimsical as it seems. He might have been a master chimney sweep, which actually would make him more diabolical because he literally would have profited.
Oh, he definitely was, yeah.
Although, anyway.
He had the songs and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, come
Everyone
on, kids, let's
watch that movie now.
And go sit in the chimney and die.
Well, listen to this story and then go watch that movie and just see if you enjoy it. Lastly,
much less.
There was some description of a general public perception that while shortening the lifespans of the youngest and most vulnerable members of society was regrettable, it had to be weighed against the dangers to society of having chimneys catch fire more often. And I guess I can respect the cold logic of that position, but I have to say I'm going to go put myself in the camp of looking for solutions that don't involve increasing child mortality. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah. I'm going to say there's probably somewhere in between those two, your house burning down and putting children in the chimney. There's probably an option somewhere between there.
Could they have hired just little eunuchs that didn't have genitals to get?
That's probably the gray area, but I don't think it's a good one. I don't think it is. Well, there was actually, so they had mechanical devices that they were developing to do this, and one of the arguments was
brooms?
Hey, let's use those, or something you put down the chimney, probably with brooms on it. I don't know, but they had these, but they actually did not do as good of a job, so there was still a pretty big risk of fire. So there you go. Well, this has been fun. So finally, I wanted to wrap up with a brief tour of Dr. Pott's other contributions to medicine. And I mentioned he has a bunch of things named after him. You guys remember a few of them?
Oh, Pott's puffy tumor.
Oh,
it's one of the best ones.
Pott's disease.
Yep. You remember what Pott's disease is?
Isn't it TB of the bone?
Yeah, good call. Yeah, so here's a little collection.
Wait, TB?
Oh,
tuberculosis of the bone?
Yeah,
you get tuberculosis in your bone?
Absolutely.
Anywhere.
About 3% of tuberculosis cases.
Bone.
So, specifically, Pott's disease is sort of refers to tuberculosis infecting the spine, and it's kind of wild stuff. So, the tuberculosis can get into the spine. It can cause all these like rotting areas of spine for one way to put it. But it also causes cold abscesses, which is, you think of an abscess, you think of a hot boil full of gooey hot pus, right? But with these particular abscesses that are like inside the body, so you can't really see them, and they're adjacent to the spine or the bones of the spine, they're cold. Well, these called cold because they don't have a lot of the inflammation and things like that, so they can kind of develop really insidiously. Just kind of a weird feature of that illness. There's also Pott's fracture, which actually is not the fracture he had when he fell off the horse. That would make sense. Mike, Aaron, and I have definitely all treated this fracture, and this is basically
wrist fracture.
No, it's an ankle fracture. Okay. So it's where you break the distal, that's like the lower part of your fibula. That's the bone that's like on the outer part of the leg. You break that, and then your whole ankle joint basically dislocates, and so the talus, which is like the main supporting bone of the foot, slides out of the joint and slides off to the side, and so you get to usually sedate the patient or or whatnot, and then like slunk it all back into place. It's a very satisfying. Most lateral ankle fracture dislocations. You've probably done this. Mike's shaking his head. You don't like doing those?
They're satisfying until you have to put the splint on, and then you do the X-ray, and it looks just as bad as when you first went in the room. Then you got to do it again.
It's part of the fun. There's also Pott's gangrene, which is we've all seen this as well. It was just sort of the term for gangrene caused by peripheral artery disease. So like over time, people's arteries can narrow. If they don't get a lot of blood flow to the legs, this is specifically of the legs, you can actually develop gangrene where the skin dies. But if it's a slow process, you can have this like form slowly over months. And I mean, it could be there for 6 to 8 months as the skin is dying in the feet. And they used to call this Pott's gangrene. And so this is not even the last one he had named after him, but it's my favorite. And Mike said it in the beginning, is Pott's puffy tumor, which is not actually a tumor in a cancer sense, but it's a infection of the bone of the skull, the forehead, that it's an infection kind of around the bone, the subperiosteum. That's like the coating of the bone, and it's basically a frontal skull infection. It comes from usually sinusitis or infection of the sinuses. You get this like big puffy. It is literally a puffy, boggy, squishy mass on the front of the forehead under the skin, and it's a big deal. It actually can go inside the skull. It can cause infection inside the brain. It can cause increased intracranial pressure. Have you guys ever seen it?
No.
I saw
seen
one.
some people with funny shaped skulls.
No, I saw one, and I remember going, this has a name. What is this? It has a name. And I looked this up, and I called a consultant at one point. I was like, hey, I think that's what's going on. They're like, nah, I don't think so. But go ahead and get the CAT scan. They were like, okay, we think you're right.
And you were right.
Well, every once in a while. So there you go. Oh, other fun thing about Pott's puffy tumor, especially for you, Mike, wrestling is a risk factor for it because it can also be caused by trauma. And wrestlers
like trauma of not liking something that's not entertaining.
I didn't make that connection. I actually found that in the source. And I was like, oh, wrestling's a risk factor for this. So one more reason.
Because they rub your face on the mat too much?
I didn't dive into it much more than that.
Rub it back and forth.
Well, that's about all the sadness and darkness I have for today. And I was going to ask Alba, this will maybe be a recurring thing or not, but I just want to say, like, as the intern of the show, if you will, what's the most important thing you learned today?
Oh, the most important thing I learned today.
Be anxious about everything.
I was going to say everything can get me. Flying that I thought was relatively okay is not.
You need to wear sunscreen.
I need to wear more sunscreen, stop putting out my candles at all. I'm just going to stop using candles or anything sooty.
Okay.
And wash my hands.
Okay. All right. So there we go.
Those are good
live
lessons.
In fear.
Stop using anything sooty and wash my hands. That's where we go.
I hope that doing the show is a healthy experience for you going forward, though. Just starting to worry me a little bit.
We could write a movie about chimney sweeps and how we made it better by slicking the kids up. We call it Sooty Slickers. Get Billy Crystal to come up.
Okay, new lesson I learned is Mike has a morbid sense of humor. And that you can carry tobacco in your scrotum. Didn't know that.
It's we all actually have the morbid sense of humor. It's just two of us have filters on it. That's
mine for some reason is malfunctioning.
Well, I will tell you what. We do appreciate everyone listening, and we'd love to hear from all of you out there. And if you'd like to check out our merchandise or provide feedback, we can be reached through our website, www.poorhistorianspod.com. There you can send us messages and find links to our social media sites. We do work to respond to all those posts on various social media accounts as well. If you want to participate in the show, use our site to send us a medical history, a trivia question to test Mike's innate knowledge. Try to win your own medical eponym. He's really bad at them, so you probably will win, although we got pretty close today. If you do have time, please go and leave us a nice 5-star review on iTunes or whichever platform you choose. We are always looking for more audience members, so if you happen to have some lying around, send them our way. But maybe don't start them on this episode. This might be a lot for them to handle. So until next time, the Poor Historians are signing out AMA. Need like a Cockney accent.
There we go. I was going to ask.
Yeah, British Cockney accent.
I'm going to have to take a moment to get there if you don't mind.
Okay, no.
I'm on top of the morning. I'm not bothered to do it now. No, it's not quite there.
It's almost
Let me
legible.
try it. Top of the morning to ya. I do that with my dog, and that's not quite the right. What's a good
It sounded like you were
Cockney
speaking
sentence?
in cursive. Yeah.
Yeah, good job, Becca. That's not quite right. Those aren't words.
Say,
You
but you start with
Do they say oi? Oh, the rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain.
now you
Is that
sound like
closer?
Michael Caine.
No, yeah, that's Michael
He's
Caine.
Cockney.
I don't.
He is,
Oh, is he?
Yeah,
I'm
he's
not. I
considered-
don't know if this is. I should know these things.
Big deal for a lot of people in like where he grew up to be like, oh, there's a guy with a Cockney accent who's like a respected actor.
Gonna find me nowhere. Okay.
That's a good.
I
one.
prefer to call it penis patella, not Cockney.
So that's
It's a good anatomy joke, actually. It's not going to make the show, but it's good.
Dallas.